Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Winston-Salem Community Development, Housing, and General Government Committee meeting today, August 10th, 2021. Due to the Safer at Home order, all committee members are participating virtually. For virtual meetings, committee members will be muted until asked to be heard. When there is a vote, it will be necessary to take a roll call vote. A committee member will be recognized, raise their hand, and state their vote. City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Mundy.
Aye.
Councilmember Scipio.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Adams.
Here, thank you. We have a consent agenda and the general agenda. We have 9 consent agenda items and 4 general agenda items. And of the 4, 3 of them are for information only and 1 action. As we do in the practice of the City Council, are there any consent agenda items that the committee and council would like to be pulled for information or discussion? Councilmember Mundy.
C4 and C7, please.
C4 and C7. Are there any others? I would like to pull C1 just so the general and listening audience will know that since that was an item that carried over from last meeting for clarification to the public. If there are no more items to be pulled, could I please have a motion?
I move approval of the balance.
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded by Vice Chair Scipio and seconded by Councilmember Robert Clark. Would the City Clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Clark.
Aye.
Councilmember Mundy.
Aye.
Councilmember Scipio.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Adams.
Yes. City Clerk, would you please read the first item from the consent agenda?
Item C1, resolution approving naming of Quarry Park in honor of Timothy A. Grant. This item was continued from the June 15th, 2021 Community Development, Housing, General Government Committee meeting.
Thank you. Mr. DeCane, are you on?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Good afternoon. Could you give us a short summary of why this item was carried over and what you have found so that it could be passed?
Certainly, Madam Chair, Mayor Pro Tem, good afternoon to all of you, the committee members and council members. So when this item was first brought forward, there were questions raised by the committee as to had any input been received from the folks who donated the property, and did they agree with the naming? So staff was tasked to go back and obtain that information. We have done so. We've heard from the Light family, from Vulcan, and all parties who participated in donating land for the park concur with the naming the quarry at Tim Grant Park. So I hope that answers your question, ma'am.
Yes, it does. Thank you. Any other discussion? May I have a motion, please, for consent item 1?
I move for approval of C1.
Second.
It has been moved and probably seconded by Councilmember Vice Chair Scipio and Councilmember Clark. City Clerk, may we please have the vote roll call?
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Mundy.
Aye.
Councilmember Scipio.
Yes.
Pro Tem Adams.
Yes. Any other discussion? Thank you. May we go with the next item, please?
Item C4, ordinance to modify table 5.1.1, principal use table of the Unified Development Ordinance to allow schools and religious institutions in the entertainment zoning district. Planning Board recommends approval of petition.
Councilmember Mundy, you are recognized since you asked for this item to be pulled.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I just have a question. I don't think it will affect us, but I want to make sure. I know in some cases, certain businesses cannot locate within X number of feet of a school or a church. And I just want to make sure that by allowing schools and churches in the entertainment district, we wouldn't be precluding the inclusion of any future businesses. I'm not as concerned about adult-oriented businesses, but axe throwing or anything else that might come into the entertainment district? Is there a danger there?
Thank you, Mr. DeCane and Mr. King.
Mayor. Mayor Pro Tem, I'll take that one. It's good. Good afternoon. Good to see you, and good afternoon, council members. So Councilmember Mundy, in the UDO, now keep in mind there are several sets of regulations out there, some that we control here and some that are controlled by other boards, commissions, and entities. For our UDO locally, we've got spacing requirements for uses like adult establishment. Those carry spacing requirements. There are other uses like family group homes that have spacing requirements from each other. I'm not aware of anything related to this. It would be a challenge in our UDO. If you get into issues, and I can't speak for the ABC board or other entities as far as their rules, but as far as what we have in our UDO, there would be no spacing requirement that I'm aware of that would cause conflicts amongst those land uses.
That was my assumption. Thank you for clarifying that. So given that explanation, I would make a motion that we approve item C4.
May I have a
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded by Councilmember Monday and Councilmember Scipio. City Clerk, may we have the roll call vote?
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Mundy,
Aye.
Councilmember Scipio,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Adams.
Yes. And the consent item passes. Next item, please.
Item C7, update on Debco Holdings Incorporated, 119 Barlow Circle. This item was continued from the May 11th, 2021 Community Development Housing General Government Committee.
Good afternoon, Ms. Richmond.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. This is an update on a property that was in our demolition categories. This property has been sold 3 times actually since May, and the current new owner has improved the property since May. It is now being improved. The property has a voluntary demolition agreement with the city. It has only 3 violations now. It has had a tremendous amount of repair, and it's on its way to fully being renovated.
Thank you. Councilmember Monday.
Thank you. I guess this is a protocol question. I was going to ask if the memo supersedes the CARF. So in the future, if I see a memo that is dated more recently than the CARF, can I make the assumption that we're voting on the information in the memo as opposed to the CARF that predates it?
Ms. Richmond.
The memo was submitted, yes. Let's see, the memo was submitted with the CARF.
So if I read the CARF, it says we're voting to demolish. And that's why I wanted some clarification on this one.
But Ms. Richmond, and maybe Attorney Carmen is in the audience on the call, on the meeting. But wouldn't the order stand as it is once we send it out of committee? It does not change until it changes tonight. So if we issue an order to demolish in the committee, if they have a demolition order, that it stays with it unless it changes in the council, the committee or the council?
Ms. Richmond, Attorney Carmen.
I'll be happy to address that question, Madam Chair.
Thank
Good
you,
evening,
City.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, committee members, and council members. Yes, you're correct. This category appears to be repairs less than 50%, which is still the case considering there are some items that are outstanding. It would be different if all of the items had been repaired. So it will go forward based upon the original recommendation with the understanding that some of the items have been repaired. It's still in the same category, basically.
Does that help you, Councilmember Monday?
Yes, yes, it does.
Okay.
Now, in the
Councilmember-
past,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Excuse me. Some committee members in the past have made a motion to hold the item in committee to allow for additional time to repair, to finish the repairs. So you could do that, or you could move forward with the item. And then once council adopts the item, certainly before any demolition takes place, staff will update and make sure all the repairs have been done. And if that's the case, then I can cancel the demolition ordinance if it has been recorded based upon a prior authorization given to me by council.
Councilmember Clark.
Yeah, it would be my preference to hold it in committee because the person is making a good faith effort and they're almost finished. I think I may be the only person old enough to remember when we actually had one that we demolished after they had fixed it up because the left hand did. You remember too. I didn't know if you was old as me or not, but anyway.
I am.
So I think since this is, the person certainly is working hard on it, I think Ms. Richmond said it's been sold 2 or 3 times in a month. I will make the motion that we hold it in committee for 30 days and with a report coming back at the next committee meeting on the status.
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded by Councilmember Clark and Councilmember Scipio that we hold item 7 in committee until September, what is the date? We need a date. September
September 14th, it looks like.
Okay,
Yep.
until September 14, 2021. City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Mundy,
Aye.
Councilmember Scipio,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Adams.
Yes, then that motion passes. Thank you very much. Now we will move on to the general agenda. And City Clerk, would you please call the first item?
Item G1, Emergency Rental Assistance Program Update.
Ms. Tony, are you with us?
Yes. Good.
Ms. Tony, congratulations and welcome to the world of community development, housing, and general government.
Thank you so much.
And your first committee meeting.
Yay. Glad to be here. And thank you and good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, Chair Adams, and members of the committee and council. So the update for the Emergency Rent Assistance Program will be made by our Community Development Director, Ms. Marla Newman. So I'll turn it over to her at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem and Chair Adams, members of the committee, members of the City Council. Again, we're here to give you a brief update. And of course, there were numbers and items, as you see before you, that were presented in the packet last week. I have some updated numbers as of just a few hours ago, and I did this on yesterday, and we have additional numbers since reporting to Finance Committee yesterday. But just as a little backdrop, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program was started, as you see here, on April 5th of 2021. It is a collaboration with the Forsyth County Department of Social Services. We have a joint application process, so there's one application portal. So anyone, whether you live inside the city limits of Winston-Salem or in Forsyth County, you go into the one application portal. We thought this would make it easier for the residents of our community to have that one access point. We have a third-party vendor by the name of Tetra Tech. They provide project management, they run the call center, they provide eligibility specialists, quality control, and they make the payment recommendations based on the eligibility review that they have performed. The county handles the additional quality control and all of the financial matters in terms of making payments to vendors and issuing those checks to the landlord as well. And our role was to provide the financial support to Tetra Tech, that third-party vendor, as well as Neighborly Software, which provides the online application and the licenses for usage. Since we started the program, and as of today, we are now at 989 approved applications. We have now 623 cases assigned to an eligibility specialist, and that is a number that we would like to see diminish. So as of yesterday, we had 650 that needed assignment. Today, we're down to 623. So they're moving to the next level of the process. Under review by an eligibility specialist, we're now up to 720 cases. Yesterday, we were at 674. So you see the inverse of those numbers. Our denial rate has gone up by 4. So now we have 157 applications that were denied. As of today, either dispersed or pending disbursement, the city has $3,927,184 that has gone out, which represents 58% of our total allocation from the Department of Treasury. Our initial award from the Department of Treasury was $7,478,359, 10% of which, or $747,835, were allocated for administrative cost, which leaves for actual direct assistance to tenants, $6,730,523. So as you can see, we're well over 50% of having dispersed the monies that are on hand for direct assistance. And I can pause there and answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you, Ms. Newman. Does any of the council committee or council have any questions for Ms. Newman?
Yeah.
Councilmember Clark.
At the Finance Committee yesterday, Ms. Newman, you pointed out that there's a phase 1 and a phase 2 of funds. And the phase 2 funds were not as onerous as far as the requirements. Would it make sense if someone didn't qualify for phase 1 to automatically see if they might qualify under phase 2?
We have to expend all of phase 1 before we can access the phase 2 dollars.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Monday.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Ms. Newman, this is just a question out of curiosity, since you may have access to county numbers as well. Are the county numbers tracking along similarly as far as percentages go?
No, sir. The county is, I'm going to retrieve some data. I'm right here in the system. If you give me just 1 second while this loads. The county has about a 22% delivery rate in terms of applications funded. So yes, we have a significant difference. And a lot of that, of course, is just based on where the applicants reside, who's actually coming to the program and making requests for assistance. So when we checked in our team call about an hour ago, the county was at 22% and had spent less than $1 million.
And are they under the same guidelines that we are, that they have to have 65% spent by, I think you said the deadline was September 30th?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other comments or questions from the committee or council members? Ms. Tony.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. In a recent meeting that we had with you, Mayor Pro Tem, to address making sure residents had access to the application process, we have scheduled a community event. It will be on Saturday, August the 21st from 9 to 1 at the 14th Street Recreation Center. And so we knew from you that it is important to be in a community type of setting and offer this assistance to residents in the community. So the marketing department is working on getting the word out. And so you'll be hearing about that soon.
Thank you. And I know the council member Scipio will do all she can to help get the word out as well. Any other comments or questions? Again, Ms. Newman and Ms. Tony, again, I want to thank the Community Development Department on behalf of the council. Again, like I said yesterday, I don't think the citizens realize the amount of work that has gone into all of these efforts since COVID. That your department has worked constantly and diligently to make sure that we were compliant, but also making sure, working with marketing and communication, Mr. McNeil and his team, to ensure that we do what we have to do to get the word out and get folks engaged and educated so that they could reap these benefits from government. Again, thank you very much. And again, I always look forward to all of the monthly updates as well as attending the weekly meetings. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next item, City Clerk.
Item G2, consideration of items relating to non-discrimination ordinances. Ordinance amending Chapter 38 of the City Code of the City of Winston-Salem to create non-discrimination in public accommodations and non-discrimination in employment ordinances. Ordinance amending the annual appropriation and tax levy ordinance for the City of Winston-Salem for fiscal year 2021-2022.
Attorney Carmen, thank you so much.
Good afternoon again. You have before you an ordinance amending Chapter 38 to create the non-discrimination and public accommodations ordinance and a non-discrimination and employment ordinance. With two exceptions, the ordinance is basically the same as that presented back in June at the General Government Committee meeting. The two exceptions are as follows. The effective date of the ordinance, instead of being 60 days from the date of adoption, is now January 1st of 2022. The civil enforcement piece, instead of being January 1st of 2022, is now March 1st of 2022. The reason for that is that in analyzing the workload of the Human Relations Department and some other factors, it was determined that 2 additional positions would be needed. And that's the Part B, which we'll get into shortly. But those 2 additional positions, one would be for outreach and the other would be for investigations and mediation or conciliation under the ordinance. We do anticipate there to be maybe not significant, but a fair number of, at least initially, a fair number of complaints filed under the non-discrimination ordinances, in particular employment. And one reason we anticipate such, as I explained to Mayor Pro Tem Adams some time ago or recently, the EEOC, of course, has a process for taking in employment discrimination complaints. And I'm very familiar with that process and know that it is very time-consuming and lengthy. Under the ordinance, the time frame for filing complaints, reviewing those complaints and reaching a decision is much shorter than the EEOC process. So I would anticipate citizens may find a remedy available under this process more readily than the EEOC process. So that's one reason to anticipate that citizens will take advantage of the ordinance once it's adopted and becomes effective. To explain better the 2 positions and the need for those positions, I believe Wanda Allen Opperha, the Human Relations Director, is on the call or on the meeting, and she'll be happy to answer any questions. But again, the ordinance is basically the same as presented last time with those 2 edits in terms of the effective date, which again is January 1st of 2022, and the civil enforcement piece becomes effective March 1st of 2022. And with respect to the latter, my office would need at least some time to ascertain whether or not, based upon the complaint load and the reasonable cause complaints, if I need to make reassignments of my staff to deal with filing the lawsuits. So that time frame, that 2-month time frame, gives me an opportunity to assess that and make some assignment adjustments if I need to. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Again, Wanda Allen Opperha is on the meeting as well.
Thank you, Attorney Carmen. Thank you also, Dr. Opperha, for your participation in this process as well. Councilmember Clark.
Yeah, we just got some of this information today. So I have kind of a general question in that there are federal laws prohibiting these types of actions. Matter of fact, we have had some of our employees file complaints, EEOC complaints against the city from time to time. My question is, how does the city's actions interface with EEOC and the courts?
I'll be happy to answer.
Because it seemed like to me that we're trying to supersede the court system, and does our system have a checks and balances? Does it have an appellate appeal process? Does it allow the accuser to question the accused? I'm a big fan of our legal system. I think after 250 years, they've worked hard to have a system that's fair to everybody. And are we suddenly taking its place? Or if someone were to file an EEOC complaint with the federal government and with us, how does all this fit together?
Attorney Carmen.
Thank you. I'll be happy to answer all of those questions. If you'll take a look at the employment ordinance, there is a provision in the ordinance that specifically says that the complaining party still has all the rights available under state and federal law. So it will not supersede state or federal law. But I will say EEOC, in terms of employment discrimination, first of all, it does not have all of the protected categories that are listed in the ordinance. And then the second thing is that it starts with employers of 15 or more employees. So it does not reach everybody in terms of class, and it does not reach everybody in terms of size. But this will not supersede the rights of an employee under the EEOC laws. An employee could very well come to the city, again, hoping to get resolution faster than the EEOC laws. EEOC, you have 180 days to file a complaint, 60 here. So they could very well try to seek resolution and hopefully obtain it under the city process long before they even have to file a complaint under EEOC. But that would not, the city process does not supersede EEOC. And the other thing I mentioned last time is that I've been in contact with EEOC. In fact, Wanda Allen-Abraham and I met with EEOC to talk about a process similar to fair housing, where our fair housing ordinance is substantially equivalent to the federal law. So we would be looking at that process down the road, having our ordinance deemed substantially equivalent to the EEOC law, so the employee could file just one complaint with us, and that would count for both the federal process and the city process. But the city process does not supersede the federal process.
What is the appeal process? Who makes the decision for the city? Is there an appellate process?
Okay, so the complaint is filed with the Human Relations Department. The Human Relations Director and staff will investigate that complaint. If cause is found, then the complaining party and the respondent have the opportunity to have a hearing before the hearing board. It's voluntary, they don't have to do that. Once the civil enforcement process kicks in, that's assuming they go through the conciliation process and they're not able to resolve it. Once that civil process kicks in, then I would file a complaint, and the court system would basically decide whether or not a violation of the ordinance has occurred. It ultimately rests with the court system to make that final determination. The city process from complaint to conciliation is basically voluntary.
Yeah, would you describe that as a mediation type of process, both parties getting together?
Yes, exactly. We call it conciliation, but it's mediation. It's the same thing.
Yeah, it's not arbitration, though. It's mediation.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That's all. Thank you, Ms. Adams.
Does any other committee members or council have any questions or comments? Dr. Abraham, do you have any comments?
Mayor Pro Tem Adams, good afternoon. And good afternoon, members of the City Council. Basically, I just wanted to say that I do concur with everything that City Attorney Carmen just discussed, particularly the fact that this should help our local residents to be able to have employment-based concerns, complaints resolved at a local level in a more expedient fashion. With us being local, they would be able to come in and speak with us. We could probably more readily speak to them over the telephone and so forth, so that they do not have to go through a lot of the red tape that they would go through at the level of the federal government. And so I think that it would be a really positive thing for the community to be able to work directly with local folks who could actually walk them through the process and help them to understand what the laws entail.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councilmember Monday.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I just want to remind folks that this is a very positive move as far as the business environment goes, our ability to recruit businesses to Winston-Salem. We were one of the early adopters when we discussed this back in March. We have taken quite some time to cross all our Ts and dot all our Is, thanks to Attorney Carmen to make sure that we're doing this intentionally and wisely. But I would say that in the meantime, Charlotte, who initially was not going to do this, has not only adopted theirs, but they've already, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Attorney Carmen, their effective dates will move more quickly than we will in enacting this. So any further delay on this is just going to put us in a non-competitive position with respect to recruitment. So I think we need to realize how much broader this picture is than simply the LGBTQ community. And certainly, I mean, I just have to say that if the courts were fair and everyone were treated differently, we wouldn't need this action. We wouldn't need Black Lives Matter. But, you know, that's not the case. So we do need to take some action to make sure that people are treated fairly.
Attorney Carmen.
Yes, thank you. There are certain aspects of the Charlotte ordinance that become effective October 1st of this year, but the employment ordinance, as I recall, becomes effective January 1st of 2022. And what I sent you all this afternoon, or the clerk on my behalf, was an updated chart of all of the communities that have adopted ordinances and some that are still under consideration.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? This is an action item, and I would need a motion to move forward this to the council on Monday.
I'd make a motion that we approve item G2.
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded by council members Monday and Scipio. City Clerk, may we please have the roll call vote?
Councilmember Clark,
I'm going to abstain at this time.
Councilmember Mundy,
Aye.
Councilmember Scipio,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Adams.
Yes. And the motion passes 3-1 with 3 yes votes and 1 abstention going to council on Monday. City Clerk, would you please read the next item?
Item G3, information on subdivision street creek crossing requirements in peer cities.
Mr. DeCane, please. And Mr. King.
Mayor Pro Tem, I'll take this one. Steve Smotherman on our staff is going to make the presentation on this item. He's prepared a report. He's got some slides to share with the committee. I will turn it over to Steve, and I think Meredith may help him share some of those slides to get ready for this one. There we go.
You. Thank you, Mr. Smotherman.
Okay, I'm trying to find the slides.
Welcome to the world of virtual.
Yes. Well,
Look on the screen.
okay.
Meredith is good.
There we go. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Martin.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, members of council, members of the committee. I apologize for my inefficiency in technology, but I'll do the best. I'm going to give you a quick overview about public roadway creek crossing requirements. Meredith, the next slide. To give you the background, if you remember back in February of this year, there was a public hearing for the Doral Drive Renolda Road interchange plan that was adopted, but it did raise the issues about street connectivity and crossing creeks. Specifically, the incident in that interchange plan was Long Creek Village preferring to have a road cross over Muddy Creek that would connect to Doral Drive and make it more convenient for them to get to the interchange. That raised some issues about costs and environmental impact, and council asked staff to research peer cities to see how they treat public street creek crossings. Next slide, please. Let me first state that if you don't have good street connectivity, the impacts are street congestion, longer travel times, and when that happens, you have more traffic safety issues as drivers get impatient. It also causes longer emergency services response times for EMS, fire, and police. And I'm going to show you 2 examples in Winston-Salem that shows you some of the situations we have. Next slide, Meredith. The first is near the Meadowlark Middle and Elementary Schools. You can see Meadowlark Drive, Brookberry. Up to the north is Robin Hood Road, and to the south at the bottom of the slide is Country Club Road. As you can see, there are several, this area is developing, several subdivisions on to the right of the slide, New Sherwood Forest, Cedar Trails, Lantern Ridge, and you can see a fairly significant street network. However, none of those local streets cross over Muddy Creek. So anybody in those areas that want to go to the west, if they're on the east side, have to make their way down either to Country Club Road or make their way up to Robin Hood Road to go west. And the same thing with residents in Brookberry and Meadowlark Drive. To go east, they're going to have to make their way up to Robin Hood Road or Country Club Road to head in that direction. Next slide, Meredith. And this is a little further to the northeast. This is an area between Robin Hood Road to the south and Ronaldo Road and Yakinville Road to the north. And you can see Mill Creek in that area. This area is not quite as fully developed, but it is fairly well developed with Greenbrier Farms and Town and Country Estates. And you can see that there are no local streets that cross over Mill Creek. So again, the situation is that residents on the east side, if they want to go west, have to make their way to Robin Hood Road or Yakinville Road to head west, and people on Greenbrier Farms or other developments on the west side of Mill Creek have to either go north to Yakinville Road or Chatillon Drive to Robin Hood to make their way west. So I just wanted to show you a couple examples. This does not exist only in the west. There are areas in the east along Brushy Fork Creek and to the south and southwest along the South Muddy Creek that have the same situation. Next slide, please. I know at the public hearing for the interchange plans, there was a inquiry about finding the costs. The best source that I could find was NCDOT Division 9 projects that are responsible for most of the bridges and their replacement. And you can see that the costs range from a low of around $500,000 to a high of $2 million. Novak Street, which was on that, is no longer a state project. As you know, it's a local project. And I found out today that the actual bid cost for that is $600,000 rather than $500,000. So with material costs going up, some of these costs are going up. Of all these, only Dole Road has actually been completed. The rest of them are projected to happen at some point or have been delayed in some cases. Next slide, please. As far as peer cities with their ordinance and standards, the main ordinance that generates street construction is the residential subdivision ordinance. And they have a requirement that all new lots have to have a certain amount of frontage on a public street. And the provisions of the subdivision ordinance that really enforce that are, the streets on the thoroughfare or collector street plan needs to be constructed. A lot of the cities you can see, some of them have a maximum block perimeter, such as Greensboro and Raleigh. Some have a maximum block length or a maximum cul-de-sac length, so that if you try to go beyond that, you're going to have to create another street. And then Winston-Salem and Durham have a connectivity ratio, which is the number of links divided by the number of nodes. You can think of nodes as intersections. So you need to have more street connections than you do intersections. The higher Winston-Salem has a 1.2 and Durham 1.4. Higher the ratio, the more streets you need to have. And then the far right column is the stub street requirement, which typically communities look at trying to require a street stub to each of the typical four sides of a property. In some cases, as in Durham and Charlotte, it's not only one per each of the four sides, but if a property butts another one for a long distance, then they may have to do more than one stub. Notice there's a little asterisk there, and the note at the bottom, all stub street requirements are subject to waivers and exemptions. Meredith, next slide. And the exemptions exist in all the cities for natural impediments such as very steep slopes. And then the second one is for perennial creeks or streams and municipal water supply watershed critical areas, such as areas near Salem Lake. You don't want a whole lot of streets in that area that would have runoff from cars, oil and all that so close to your water supply. There are also exemptions available for man-made features such as historic landmarks, controlled access highways, major institutional uses such as churches, hospitals, and schools, and lotting configurations on adjoining properties that don't allow for a stub street. But likewise, if the adjoining property does have a stub street, then the developer is expected to tie into that street. Next slide, please. Given the cost of providing the creek crossings, I inquired of our peer cities if they knew of any policy or program for providing financial assistance. None of them offer any. So the result would be that land parcels near creeks may remain undeveloped if the developers believe the costs are too great to be absorbed or passed on to the buyers or renters. Next slide, Meredith. And so our recommendations are not earth-shattering, but one is to consider financially assisting developers when they're interested in doing a creek crossing, particularly when the location would be beneficial and strategic for the city. And then the second recommendation is review our subdivision ordinance criteria for determining exceptions and try to make them more specific. For example, saying that all subdivisions over 300 lots, if there's a creek on the property and city needs that cross, then they're required to do it, whereas subdivision with 30 lots may not be required to do that. However, each creek crossing is a unique situation, so it's a little hard to do a one-size-fits-all requirement. But those are the two recommendations that we have, and I'll be glad to try to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Smotherman. Councilmember Clark.
Has this been an issue that you heard from any developers where they would have liked to have a creek crossing but couldn't because of the cost?
Aaron, I'll defer to you on that one.
You know, Councilmember Clark, the way this conversation usually goes is there's a subdivision that comes in adjacent to one of these streams, and staff would ideally prefer the stream get crossed to provide improved connectivity to the whole community. Yeah. And the developer comes back and says, you know, that's a $700,000 project. We can never absorb the cost of that and spread it over the lots that we're trying to build. And as Steve mentioned, we have exemptions in our ordinance where if a developer can demonstrate they meet one of those exemptions, then they are allowed to get out of that. And that's the way the conversation usually goes. I can't remember a specific example where a developer said, boy, I don't want to say that.
You don't need to use names, but there are instances where people would, if we were paying for it, they would not mind crossing the creek.
I would say that's a fair statement. There's probably been a handful where I think the recognition of the improved connectivity to the development they were building is a benefit to those residents, and therefore they would appreciate the connection. And if the city had some way to participate, they may be more willing to do that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Macintosh, and then Councilmember Monday.
I know I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but if we push these costs, if we decided this is important and we push these costs onto developers, the developers are just going to turn around and push it on to tenants through their landlords or to homeowners. So it comes back to the affordable housing issue. And even though it may not seem like a greater good issue where the entire city population should contribute to it, it does affect a much larger area than just the homes that are being built. One of the cases that was shown here, one of the situations was Mill Creek and Ransom Road. we're going to run into a firestorm there that is kind of well-deserved. And we're going to have a bunch of homes going in, and people are going to have to get to that development and from that development along a road that is nowhere near ready to accept the capacity. If we had a program like this when Greenbrier was built, we would have crossed that creek, and people who were buying houses in Greenbrier would have just accepted that as a done deal. Now, even if we had the money, we would have to go back and fight probably a pretty pitched battle with an existing neighborhood about running more traffic through their property. So we'll look at this as us taking on an additional cost burden. I think we have to balance that against public safety, against the cost of improving transportation links that already exist, but then we have to go back and widen and do all that stuff. And we also have to look at the ability to keep development as close in as possible in existing places rather than push out towards the edge. Anytime we push out towards the edge, we increase costs across the board. So, school systems, fire, police, all that stuff. So this is going to be kind of a bitter pill, but my suggestion is that we figure out a way to do this funded through the city, at least in conjunction with developers. Not that they don't spend anything on it, but if we can fill a gap, if we can make it work, then I think we should.
Thank you. Councilmember Mundy.
What I think Councilmember Macintosh is saying, we'll cross that bridge when we build it. But I'm sorry, you can fire me now. I have a question on actually the info form that you shared with us. Also in the vein of, are we making things too much of a burden for our developers? On page 4 of that, where it's got some minimum number of public street access connections, if we look at the comparison between Winston, Durham, Greensboro, High Point, Charlotte, and Raleigh, we are clearly more restrictive than anyone else. So my question, in an environment where we're trying to encourage more development, more building, is this an area where we could relax this somewhat and help developers and still be very much in line with our peer cities?
Councilmember Mundy, I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem, I hope I didn't jump in front of you.
You jump, Eric. Go ahead.
Okay. Councilmember Mundy, the standards that Steve referenced in his presentation around block length, access points, connectivity ratios, I don't hear a lot of complaining from developers about meeting that. That is a standard that works well, that's rational, and frankly, that one is fairly easily met. So I don't hear a lot of complaints there. I think this real issue is when you get on the exterior of that subdivision and you're adjoining a creek, it's getting over that creek. And like I say, you saw some of the range of those bridge projects that Steve quoted, going anywhere from 600,000 up to 2 million. And again, that is very dependent in terms of environmental conditions, the span and the type of bridge and the culverts and all those things. Trying to take that number, as Councilmember Macintosh articulated very well, we've got a lot of other costs that go into housing, and trying to take that cost of $800,000 and spreading it over 100 lots, he's 100% right. That cost gets passed on to the consumer. And so we're solving one issue with connectivity, we're creating another in terms of housing affordability. And so that is really the dynamic we're at right now.
Councilmember Larson.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. This topic is more than just a neighborhood issue. It's a broader issue of public works within the city and how we communicate across creeks and across ravines and things that divide us. These little bridges need to have some standards, and they need to have some quality put into them. I don't know how, maybe our engineering department can talk a little bit about it, but we make assumptions when we go across bridges that somehow they're going to be safe, well-engineered, and the city has in fact endorsed and protected them as we've gone through the process. And I would hope that we could look at them as part of the infrastructure of the city as a whole, and not at the preference of some small neighborhood. We do seem to have some precedent in allowing a certain amount of money to be spent on particularly troublesome water work problems, where we have an erosion issue with a creek where we spend 80-20% match to address a certain erosion or control issue. that we can have on our rivers and stream banks, which may be the precedent for us to use in this case. But I do think there's a good cause for the city to be involved in what is a long-term structural investment in communications and linkages within this city as a whole. And I'd like us to continue to look at the possibility of funding that. I haven't heard today exactly what that equals in the sense of monetary impact, but it's clearly going to have to be a major cost sharing by the developers and the homeowners and other people involved by this as a solution to a long-running, potentially developing problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments or questions for Mr. King and Mr. Smotherman? All right, this is an information item. Mr. King, Mr. Smotherman, I would suggest that you get with staff and others, and again, look at what our role could be. If we just use the fact again that you stated how important we all know connectivity is. And as you said, what we've done, and Councilman Macintosh, is we are allowing more build out, which means there is not going to be any connectivity. This may give us an opportunity to connect or reconnect some parts of our city and these new developments that are going on that I know you can see what happens on Yakinville, Renolda, Chatillon on Saturdays and in the mornings and in the afternoons when it's quitting time. It gets crazy. And I'm sure those same things are on Country Club. I've seen it in Robin Hood, that all of these people funnel because they have no other way to get back home except these two routes. And everybody's using them because there are no other parts of connectivity. So I ask you as the chair to please go and see where we can be somewhat instrumental in helping with the connectivity of our neighborhoods, especially with this infrastructure money coming. It might be a time for us to look at doing a benchmark prototype project to connect the community to connectivity. What you think?
We're clear. We know where we're going on this, and we'll get to work on that, and we'll bring back a follow-up request.
All right. Thank you so much.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, I'm interrupting. I think in the future, if we have your permission, we'd like to include the engineering staff as council member.
The more the merrier, Mr. Smotherman. We are a team.
Thank you.
Councilmember Macintosh, I think you had your hand up. No?
So just saying, go for it.
He's going for it? Okay. That's an information item, and we look forward to your next report. City Clerk, please call the last item, please.
Item G4, information on National Register of Historic Places nomination for Winston Lake Golf Course.
Mr. DeCane and Mr. King, you're up.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem, I'll take this one. So this is a request. Councilmember Scipio reached out to our staff and said, hey, I'd like to explore the possibility of having Winston Lake Golf Course added to the National Register of Historic Places. And so we have worked with Councilmember Scipio to provide an overview of what that process would look like. That's included in the one-page memo you have in your information packets. And also to give some cost estimates on what it would look like to do something like this. So in short, the first step in that process is to study the eligibility, and that would be done through hiring a consultant to do that, to study eligibility. And I think the ballpark estimate we included in your report was around $2,500 for that to be done. They would see that through the process at the state, and that is a somewhat lengthy process, over a year in time is what you could estimate. And basically, once that's done and a determination is made at the state level, if you've made it past that hurdle, then you would move forward with a formal nomination request to the National Register of Historic Places. If you obviously do not make it past that hurdle, there's no reason to move forward. But assuming you do make it through there, you would move on. And again, you would hire a consultant to write that nomination, that formal nomination. And I think the number we quoted you was around $10,000 to have a consultant do that level of work. and to see that through the process. And there you're probably looking at over a year in terms of that process. So we wanted to bring this to the committee to get it out there, to share that information, and to get some direction on this as far as whether or not to proceed, how we should proceed, those types of things. So that's a request. Councilmember Scipio may have more to add to that if you like, but I'll stop there.
Thank you. Councilmember Scipio.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. You may be asking yourself, why in the world would we want to do this? It's just a golf course. Well, it is not just a golf course. And you must understand that Winston-Salem was a very progressive city when it came to race relations, when things were segregated. And one of the phenomenal things that they did was, as a municipality, they created a golf course for the African Americans in the community. That may seem something sort of natural because we had Reynolds Park, but Blacks could not play there. Most of the golf courses that were created for African Americans during segregation were golf courses that were private. They were created by African Americans and organizations, private, not public, so that African Americans could have that same experience. We must celebrate how magnificent this city was in many things and how progressive it was to be able to step out and say, yes, we'll have a public course for our African Americans. You have to think about the time and the era and all of the oppression that was being placed on people of color. And yet in this city, there were people, city council members who said, yes, we'll go ahead and we're going to have them have that. Guess what? We also got Winston Lake Park. That was the other thing that we had because we never had a formal park. And many cities didn't do that. Our leadership then was very progressive, although they maintained the status of segregation. So for the African Americans who lived here, we benefited from things that others in our community had. And this is why I recommend that we celebrate it. Let's be progressive. Let's proceed with this. Let's recognize what our leadership did. And you must understand, there were not Black people. I think we may have had one on the city council at that time.
Thank you.
That's important. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilmember Macintosh.
While I agree, recognizing and celebrating this golf course as for what it is truly important. Having been through a couple of historic district nomination battles and having done multiple historic nominations for properties I've restored, I'm wondering if there are any strings attached to the process or to the end product that we need to be careful of. I know that when the 4th Street area there was a big battle fought over that about whether it should be a National Registered District. At the time, opponents said that they did not want that done because they may want to come back and make significant changes that would be prevented by the federal government if any federal money was involved. My question is, will this impede any future improvements that we decide to make on that property? I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's something that we need to ask. And if it would prevent us from doing something like the splash pad or the water park out there, over there, is that something that we need to be conscious of before we do this? We don't want to box ourselves into a position of not being able to do that. So that's just a question I think is prudent.
Thank you, Councilmember McIntosh. Mr. King, do you want to weigh in or on that?
I am going to bring in our historic resources expert, Michelle McCullough, and let her speak to that comment.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee.
Hi, Michelle McCullough.
Hi. Hello, everyone. So good to see you all. Miss you all in person. Great question, Councilperson McIntosh. What we're looking at here is just a National Register nomination for the golf course, not the whole park. We're really looking at the golf course so we can incorporate that civil rights history and the golf course history. I mean, this is a fantastic resource. With that, it won't be locally designated, so we're not talking about local landmarking, so there'll be no restrictions, meaning they want to make a change on the fifth, Aaron's going to get me, fifth hole or fifth tee, whatever it's called, they can go ahead and do that. They don't have to come to the Historic Resource Commission. What this does do, though, is it does give protection anytime a federally funded project comes through. And that is just a stop. So there's mitigation so that, let's say they wanted to widen the road and it was going to affect the golf course, they'd have to stop and make sure, is this the best thing to do in this case? Is this the best thing to do to shrink down this resource? And this came in after, we lost a lot of old neighborhoods and we lost a lot of African-American neighborhoods. So it actually only has a lot of carrots and not a lot of sticks. So I hear your apprehension and I feel them too, but just National Register will give it the honor that it deserves and let us get all that history down. So in the nomination, I'm open for any other questions.
Thank you. Councilmember McIntosh, you okay? Or you want to?
I'm happy to hear that. I knew that Michelle would know the answer.
Yeah. I'm a golfer. I've played for 26 years, and I learned to play at Winston Lake, Ernie Marsh.
Yeah.
In 95, I think, or 96. Really? I played Sunday, as a matter of fact. African Americans have always known the history of that course, and I would say we've been somewhat selfish about it in that, we felt like it was built for us, and why ain't it still for us, So in other words, we have transferred that selfishness into ownership and engagement. I think, as I said before, when we did the Walk of Fame and we've done some commemorative art around the city that tells some history of our city, we can never negate the impact or the effect that African Americans and others have contributed to the history of this city. And I believe, like when we tout the National Theater Festival, when we get all these thousands of people, whenever they come back, maybe they'll come back next year, we need to always look at the marketing of it. We already have grasped the marketing of the theater festival, but just think if we did more to get more, not just African Americans, but people who generally love theater, love African American history. And when you come to Winston-Salem, there is Michelle, the past Mayor Pro Tem and I was on that tour bus, the first one we did with the trolleys, during the theater festival years ago. The people that participated in that from out of town, you couldn't have told them that we didn't have it going on. From what Michelle and others were able to put together, they thought, oh my goodness, look at the rich history of African Americans in this city. Others seem at times to recognize it more than we do ourselves. And I think it's a great thing. Thank you, Councilmember Scipio. Ms. McCullough knows, and Mr. King, that I've been trying to get this done for a while too, that we recognize that golf course and the great golfers that play there. Gifford, Sifford, and Dent, and all of these golfers, they played there. We were on the tour. There was an African-American golfing tour, just like the PGA, but Black golfers couldn't play. So African-Americans had to start their own tennis association, for the Venuses and Serenas that eventually got a bid to the US Open because they could not play in the white arenas. So I think this is a step forward for Winston-Salem in providing and capturing, as Ms. McCullough said, that history that people maybe even will take up golf. Now, let me help you with this. Winston Lake Golf Course is not the easiest golf course in the world. You can play the lake, you can play anywhere, but Winston Lake is tight, as we say, and very hilly. There is no flat lies on it. But I commend the city for you doing this years ago. Even during a bad situation, the city was still I think they had some guilt issues with, well, maybe we do this over here, even though we got this over there, that made them feel a little bit better about the present situation at the time. I love Winston Lake. I love the improvements we made through the 14 and 18 bonds. And I look forward to seeing even more Councilmember Scipio to make this. It's really like a small miniature Augusta National. When the dogwoods bloom in the spring, the rhododendrons, the azaleas, trust me, you will think you are at Augusta National. So Councilmember Scipio, thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. McCullough, and thank you, Mr. King. And I see a hand, Councilmember Scipio.
There's also another factor, and that we really must understand that one of the great ways to increase economic prosperity in our city is through sports. And golf is a sport. We can tap into that course and do some severe marketing, and it can be so dynamic. And so we don't want to think narrow. We really need to think large and think for the future. It is a healing source that we can bring children of all races, adults of all races and genders, to that, using that as a medium for unity. So I'm certainly in favor of it, and I hope that we can move this forward.
One more thing, if all of you remember the Green Book,
yes,
of places where African Americans could only stay or eat or whatever, there should be a Green Book, Councilmember Scipio, of African American golf courses that were built doing segregation and civil rights and whatever, because golfers will come to these courses, particularly not just African American golfers, but golfers, because they would want to see, if nothing else, what was the difference in these courses and the courses they played on or play on now. And it will bring people, again, I'm Councilmember Scipio, count me in on the marketing piece. I think we could go somewhere with that Green Book.
We can.
Really do. Any other comments or questions?
And we'll throw a couple of beer whist games on in the club.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Councilmember Monday.
You can call it the Greens Book.
Burke.
The Greens.
The Greens Book.
I love it.
Oh, that would be good.
And we have to have an amen corner.
Yeah.
And I'm supportive of this idea as well.
Thank you. Councilmember Burke, how are you?
I am fine. Mayor Pro Tem Adams and other members of the council. I wanted to say, I just love this idea. And I'm grateful to you, Councilmember Scipio, for making this suggestion. I think it is just long overdue. I'm in support of it. Also, we need to show value for this historic site. It's been an historic site in my mind for as long as I can remember, even without the assignment of that title. So to really put the title on it is long overdue, and I just think it's great. And I think that for the city to even place this golf course in this community years ago, I have to commend the city for doing that as well. So thank you, Councilmember Scipio. This is a great idea. And Councilmember Mundy, I love the greens. That is great. Thank you.
Mr. King, Ms. McCullough, I also support this. I think you need to move forward with it and bring it to council, whether not this month, not Monday, but next month. Bring it back to committee if we need to, and then move it on to council. That's my recommendation.
Will do it. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other concerns or anything? And for those of you know, just a caveat, the Winston Lake Ladies Golf Association was formed a couple of months ago. And it was one of the auxiliaries of the original Winston Lake Golf Course that African-American women formed. They volunteered in the communities around the golf course and provided certain volunteerism as well on the course with teaching golf to young children and supporting the initiative of golf in the African-American community. We have over 70 women, a very diverse group, that signed up for this endeavor. And they play every Sunday. Play days are Sundays at 1 o'clock at Winston Lake. So if you're interested in learning or playing, you can call Winston Lake. Julius Reese will give you more information. But it is it's moving quickly. This organization is growing, and it's good just to see women playing at Winston Lake. So I appreciate that from the council member and staff as well. If all hearts and minds are clear, we will go ahead and end this meeting. And I wish everybody well, and be careful out there with this weather. And I'll see you Monday night. Thank you very much.
Public Works start at 6 o'clock.